They say the devil wears red, but mine wore ivory silk, with a smile so warm it could make you forget winter ever existed. I always thought love was the kind of thing that happened gradually, like erosion. A slow wearing away of the self into something softer, better, more intertwined with another soul. Her name was Eliza, and to everyone who knew her, she was perfect, elegant, gracious, sharp-witted but never cruel. The kind of woman who never raised her voice, who remembered birthdays, who made you feel like the most important person in the room just by listening. My friends envied me. My mother adored her. Even the dog loved her more than me, and I loved her like a man loves something he doesn't believe he deserves. We were married 5 years before I noticed the first crack. Not the kind you see, no lipstick on collars, no late-night texts. Just a silence that lingered too long. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At first, I thought it was stress. She worked long hours at the gallery, curating exhibits for people who never looked past the frames. She had ambition, and I admired that. I wanted to believe it was just that, ambition, but temptation doesn't come all at once. It creeps in. A shadow on the periphery. A whisper you ignore until it's too loud to unhear. I saw him for the first time on a Thursday. I'd stopped by the gallery, a spontaneous gesture, one of those things husbands do when they're trying to feel close again. He was leaning against the reception desk, laughing at something she said. Eliza's head was tilted back, her laugh soft but unguarded, the way it used to be with me. When she saw me, she didn't flinch, but she paused. A breath too long. I pretended I didn't notice. I smiled, kissed her cheek, shook his hand. His name was Julian, and his handshake told me he knew something I didn't. On the drive home, I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd caught a moment between two colleagues, that she was still mine, but some part of me, some primal, animal part, knew better. That night, she was colder. Not mean, just elsewhere. Like her body was there, but her thoughts had already moved on. She fell asleep with her back to me, and I laid awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when that distance had become normal. It's funny what we choose not to see. Even when the truth is wrapping itself around our throats, temptation turned to suspicion quickly. She started dressing differently, more expensive fabrics, deeper shades of red and black. She started working late more often, and she started laughing again. Not with me. I remember once, around midnight, I walked into the kitchen for water. She was sitting on the floor, phone pressed to her ear, whispering into the dark. She froze when she saw me, smiled too quickly. Just Chloe, she lied, slipping her phone behind her back like a schoolgirl caught with a cigarette. Tell her I said hi, I replied, voice flat. She's already gone. But her phone screen was still lit. I didn't press. I didn't want the truth, not yet. Because once you know, you can't unknow. And I wasn't ready to lose her. Not then. Not to a stranger with perfect teeth and a gallery smile. She thought she was untouchable. That I was too naive, too comfortable, too in love to notice. Maybe she was right. But love doesn't make you blind. It makes you wait. Wait for proof. Wait for clarity. Wait for the moment when you can look in the mirror and say, I didn't imagine this. She betrayed me. That moment came 3 weeks later. She left her laptop open in the living room. She never did that. She said the gallery's files were confidential. But that night, she forgot. And curiosity, sick, slow curiosity, got the better of me. I clicked the tab still open on her screen. Weekend itinerary, the Ashford estate. The Ashford was an exclusive retreat. No work events there. No conferences. Just lush rooms, firelit wine tastings, and beds with silk sheets. .2 guests. .2 names. Hers. And his. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the city breathe, wondering how long she'd been lying. How many times she'd slipped out of our life and into his arms. I wanted to confront her, but something stopped me. Not fear, not love. Curiosity, because I needed to know who she really was when the mask fell. When the ivory silk was gone. When she thought no one was watching. I needed to see the shape of her betrayal with my own eyes. And that's when I decided. I would follow her. I followed her without shame. I told myself it was justice. Survival. That a man has a right to the truth when his world starts to rot beneath his feet. But the truth? It was obsession. The kind born from heartbreak. Raw, primal, consuming. That Friday, she kissed me goodbye like she always did. Light, soft, meaningless. Her perfume lingered on my collar. She wore the burgundy coat I'd bought her last winter. The one she'd barely touched until recently. The one she'd said felt too rich for every day. But that night, she was dressed for someone else. She left at 7:08 p.m. I gave her a 10-minute head start before I slipped into my car, heart pounding harder than it should have, palms slick against the steering wheel. My headlights stayed off until the first turn. She took the highway, out of the city, toward the Ashford estate. The Ashford was nestled among whispering pines and old money elegance, a place where people came to disappear for the weekend, wrapped in anonymity and indulgence. She knew I'd never go there. It wasn't my world. But I went anyway. I parked down the road and walked through the trees, careful not to be seen. Rain clung to the branches above me, cold and needling, but I didn't care. My breath came out in clouds. My legs were shaking by the time I reached the hill overlooking the estate. Through the window of Suite 12, I saw her, not in his arms, yet. She was laughing, barefoot, wine in hand. Her face was softer than I'd seen in months, glowing in a way I didn't recognize. She turned as he entered the room. Julian. Of course it was him. He had that effortless arrogance. The kind men like me learned to spot too late. He kissed her neck like he'd done it 100 times. She didn't pull away. She welcomed him, like she'd been waiting for him all her life. I stood there for over an hour. The wind bit at my skin. My fist stayed clenched, nails biting into my palms. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't break. Instead, I memorized everything. How her laughter changed when she wasn't lying. How she poured his wine first. How she looked at him like he was the only thing that mattered. That night, something shifted in me. The betrayal was no longer a theory. It was a performance, and I was the audience. The next morning, she came home like nothing happened. She made coffee, played our Sunday playlist, kissed my cheek and asked if I wanted to go to the market. I watched her. Every movement choreographed, every word rehearsed. She was perfect, polished, composed, but I knew now she wasn't a wife. She was a character, and I had no idea how long she'd been playing this role. I started digging. Emails, passwords, her cloud backups. I told myself it was about understanding, about collecting the full picture. But really, I wanted to see how deep the knife went. And it went deep. There were texts, hundreds, photos, hotel receipts, voice notes that made my skin crawl. The language she used with him wasn't just intimate, it was cruel. She mocked me, my habits, my routines, my loyalty. He still thinks I'm working late tonight. Poor thing. You'd die laughing if you saw the soup he made. Like something out of a prison cookbook. I don't even have to lie that hard. He wants to believe I'm still his. I sat at our dining room table, surrounded by her handwriting, her scent still woven into the linen napkins she folded the day before, and I realized something chilling. She didn't just betray me. She enjoyed it. One night, I confronted her, subtly. A test. Do you ever think about getting away? Just us. No work, no phones. She looked up from her tablet and smiled, soft and patient, of course. We should plan something. Like the Ashford? A flicker, half a second. That's all it took. The air tightened. What? She said, too quickly. I tilted my head. You mentioned it once. Sounded nice. Oh, she said, relaxing a little too late. Yes. Maybe. But she never asked why I brought it up. She never asked what I knew, because she didn't think I was capable of knowing. That was her fatal flaw. Eliza was brilliant at constructing illusions, but the thing about people who live for control is, they never imagine losing it. They think they're too careful, too charming, too necessary. But the truth, no one is untouchable, not even her, not especially her. I used to think monsters wore masks. I was wrong. They wear wedding rings and warm smiles. They cook your favorite meal while texting the man they're sleeping with. They say, I love you, with steady eyes and hands that smell like someone else. Eliza didn't just cheat. She feasted on it. And once I saw that, really saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It started subtly, as it always does. The wine cabinet was restocked with bottles I'd never seen before, $200 French reds she'd once called pretentious. Her wardrobe shifted, bolder colors, plunging necklines, heels that made her nearly 6 feet tall. She wore desire like armor, and I was no longer the man it was meant for. She began hosting dinner parties again. Small, curated affairs, just a few from the gallery, she said. I played the dutiful husband. Smiled. Poured wine. Watched her light up under the gaze of strangers who didn't know she was rotting inside. But the worst part? She was good at it. God, she was good. Watching her glide through those evenings, I saw a woman who could bend light around herself, who could laugh at your joke while lying through her teeth. And the world applauded. They called her radiant, poised, effortlessly magnetic. None of them knew what I did. That she was sleeping with Julian. That she was stealing money from our shared account to rent a flat under a fake name. That she had 2 lives, and only one of them included me. The flat was in a converted factory downtown. She paid cash. I found it through a trail of transactions she'd forgotten to delete, bits of evidence carelessly scattered. Like she'd grown too confident to bother cleaning up after herself. I stood across the street one afternoon, watching the windows. She wasn't supposed to be there, but she was. She stepped onto the balcony in a silk robe, cigarette in hand, something she'd always claimed to hate. A man came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Julian. They looked comfortable, familiar, domestic. I took a photo, not for revenge, for clarity, because even as my chest burned, I needed something tangible, something I could hold in my hand when the gaslighting started, and it would start. It always does. I started noticing the indulgences in other places too. She bought a new necklace, claimed it was a gift from the gallery owner. I checked the receipt. It was shipped to the flat. She started ordering food from restaurants we never ate at, paying in cash, storing the receipts in the trash under the sink like they were expired coupons. She had a new laugh, 2.1 I'd never heard before. Low and smoky, reserved only for phone calls she thought I couldn't hear. Once, I walked past the bathroom and heard her murmuring, "You're the only one who sees me." I almost laughed, because I'd seen her, all of her, the mask, the monster, the mirror underneath. I kept notes. A ledger, almost. Not just of what she did, but how she did it. July 19th. Took $2,000 from our joint savings. Transferred to a shell account. Used to pay lease on 82 River Street. July 23rd. Working late. Was at a jazz bar with Julian. Pictures from security came across the street. Public footage. July 27th. Sent Julian a text. He's still clueless. You were right. He wants to believe I'm innocent. She thought I was blind, but she never once stopped to wonder if I was waiting. One night, we were sitting on the sofa. A film played in the background. Something nostalgic. She rested her head on my shoulder. I smelled the cologne she tried to scrub off her clothes, the faint trace of aftershave that wasn't mine. I wanted to scream. Instead, I wrapped my arm around her. She smiled. She had no idea the walls were already closing in. Here's the truth about people like Eliza. They don't just cheat on you. They rewrite you. They strip away the man you were, layer by layer, until you start to question your own instincts. Until the truth feels like a betrayal. Until you're not sure if the person looking back at you in the mirror is weak or just tired. I was tired, but not weak. And the deeper I went into her world, the more I realized something horrifying. It wasn't just lust. It wasn't even love. It was sport. She enjoyed playing me, juggling me, manipulating me, like I was one of her gallery pieces, something to be framed, admired, owned. But she forgot one thing. Even the most beautiful portraits fade when you expose them to fire. They say fire doesn't announce itself, it just takes. And by the time Eliza noticed the heat, the flames had already found the corners of her world. It began with small things. A misplaced document at the gallery. A missing invitation. A donor suddenly pulling out of a show. At first, she brushed them off. Mistakes happened, she said. Oversights. But Eliza didn't make mistakes. She prided herself on precision. She controlled every angle of her life, every conversation, every perfectly timed smile. So when the first thread unraveled, I knew it would unravel everything. I'd made sure of it. The donor? I contacted him anonymously. Sent him the evidence of how gallery funds had mysteriously disappeared during one of her curated shows. Highlighted the discrepancy between invoices and actual expenditures. He didn't ask questions. He just pulled his name and his money. The invitation? A forged RSVP sent under her name to the board of trustees, declining a private art auction that was never meant to be turned down. She missed it. Her absence was noted. I was careful, never obvious, never loud, but her house of glass had too many windows. It didn't take much to make it rattle. At home, she was still performing, still slipping into silk robes, cooking risotto, kissing me like a role she had played for so long she no longer remembered where she ended and the character began. But I could see it, behind her eyes, the cracks, the weight of juggling two lives with one pair of hands. Her robe was wrinkled. She burned dinner twice that week, and once, I found her crying in the shower. I never asked why, because I already knew. Her calls with Julian grew shorter, colder. She snapped at him once while I was pretending to sleep. No, I can't just disappear. Because he'll notice. He's not as stupid as you think. I smiled into my pillow. The irony didn't escape me. I wasn't the one who had underestimated anyone. She started asking questions. Have you been talking to anyone at the gallery? Did you get a strange call today? Have you noticed anything weird lately? I played dumb like a master. Weird? No. Why? She laughed shaky, too high-pitched, and waved it off, but I saw it in her eyes. She didn't know where the leak was coming from. Only that it had started. That something, somewhere, was slipping beyond her grip. Then came the night she found the camera. A tiny one. Nothing fancy. Hidden in the smoke detector of the flat on River Street. She thought she'd secured it. Rented it in cash. Signed with a fake name. But her mistake was trusting Julian. He'd left his real name on a delivery order. I used that. Used it to trace .to hack.to watch. She called him, furious. I only caught half the conversation. You're a child, Julian. You think this is all a game. Do you even understand what's at stake? He's not stupid. I think he knows. I didn't, not then. But I let her believe I did. That was the real game. I wanted her scared. Paranoid. On edge. Because people make mistakes when they're cornered. And Eliza? She had no practice in being powerless. It was around this time that she stopped sleeping, not just with me, at all. She paced at night, drifting through the apartment like a ghost. I'd hear her fingering through drawers, checking locks, whispering into her phone behind bathroom doors. I once woke to find her sitting at the foot of the bed, staring at me, her eyes bloodshot, her voice dry. Do you still trust me? She asked. I didn't answer. Just stared at her, heart hammering, waiting for the next line in her script. But there wasn't one. That was the first time I saw her falter, and I realized she was afraid, not of me, but of the unraveling. Of the invisible force clawing its way through the walls she built so carefully, so beautifully. She didn't know who was doing it. She didn't know why. She only knew something was wrong, and for a woman like Eliza, not knowing was worse than guilt. It was vulnerability, and in her world, vulnerability meant death. It all came to a head the night the gallery board suspended her. She came home late, soaked in rain, her heels in her hand, her hair tangled like ivy down her back. She didn't speak for hours, just stood in the kitchen, staring at the stove. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat. They think I misused funds. I sipped my coffee. That's awful, I said. She looked at me, eyes searching. You don't believe that? I met her gaze, smiled gently. Of course I do. She cracked then, not fully, just enough. She stormed out, slammed the door. Her phone buzzed twice, then went silent. I watched her from the balcony, standing in the rain, clutching her coat around her like it could keep her lies warm. She didn't know yet, but everything was slipping through her fingers. The board, the gallery, Julian, me. It was all falling, and she couldn't stop it. It didn't happen all at once. Eliza didn't shatter like glass thrown against stone. She cracked like a mirror, slowly, invisibly, until one day the reflection looking back at her wasn't something she recognized anymore. The collapse began with silence. Not mine, hers. She stopped answering Julian's calls. The phone would ring on the coffee table while she stared at it like it was a threat. Eventually, it stopped altogether. One day, I picked it up while she was in the shower. 9 missed calls. Julian, new message. You're ghosting me now? After everything? And below that, you said you'd fix it. You said he'd never find out. She hadn't deleted anything. That was the first sign she was slipping. The second came the next morning, when she burned the coffee twice. Eliza never burned anything. Her job? Gone. They didn't use that word, of course. People like her don't get fired. They get granted a leave of absence pending review. But the truth was in the subtext. They found the irregularities, the missing funds, the fake invoices, all the things I'd spoon-fed them, anonymously. She tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. A clerical error. A misplaced decimal, but the board wasn't blind anymore. And Eliza's charm? It was starting to tarnish. The press got hold of it next. A short piece in the culture column, curator under scrutiny. Eliza Monroe faces financial allegations. They didn't mention the affair, but the internet filled in the gaps. I came home one evening to find her on the floor of our walk-in closet, surrounded by open suitcases. Not packing, just sitting there, like she didn't know which version of herself to take. Going somewhere? I asked gently. She didn't look up. I thought maybe a week away, just to think. I stepped closer. Think about what? She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the panic. Not theatrical, not manipulative. Real, tangible, and suddenly I understood she didn't know what to do when the game stopped playing in her favor. She had lived her whole life knowing how to win, but now the rules had changed, and I was the one holding the board. Julian wasn't handling it well either. His name hadn't made it into the articles, but people whispered. Clients pulled back. One of his shows was canceled. I heard from a friend at a downtown studio that he was ranting about betrayal, about being set up, about a woman who made promises she couldn't keep. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the way he touched her that night at the Ashford, and the sympathy vanished. One night, Eliza finally spoke. Really spoke. We were sitting on the back patio, the city stretching out like a quiet ocean behind us. She was drinking too much wine, something dry and expensive, as if luxury could save her. I think I ruined everything, she said softly. I didn't answer. She looked at me, eyes glossy but defiant. Say something. I took a slow sip from my glass. What do you want me to say? I don't know. Her voice broke. That I'm still the woman you married. That stopped me, because she wasn't. And we both knew I said the one thing that had been echoing in my head for months. You're not. She flinched. The silence that followed was heavy. Like truth itself had decided to finally sit at the table with us. After that night, she changed, not dramatically, not like in the movies, but in subtle, haunting ways. She stopped looking in mirrors, stopped answering calls, stopped putting on the makeup she once used like war paint. Her world had gone gray, and as much as I hated her for what she'd done, I couldn't help but wonder, was this what she looked like without the mask? Was this who Eliza really was? A woman addicted to control, now choking on the dust of what she tried to own. Then, the letter arrived. Plain envelope. No return address. She opened it in front of me, and her hands trembled for the first time. Inside, photos. Of her. Of Julian. Of the flat. Of us. I watched her eyes scan each one, her face draining of color, and then, one line. Typed beneath the last image. Everything you build is mine now. Her hand covered her mouth. She looked at me. What does this mean? I held her gaze, and for the first time in our marriage, I lied with ease. I don't know. She wasn't untouchable. She never was. She just believed she was. And that belief, that's what I set on fire. Not out of cruelty, not even out of revenge, but because I needed her to know what it felt like to be powerless. To be afraid. To lose. Some people fight when love dies. We didn't. We just got quiet. The silence between Eliza and me wasn't peaceful. It was corrosive. Heavy. It filled every room we entered. It clung to our clothes like smoke. We spoke only when necessary, polite, mechanical exchanges over breakfast or locked behind the cold civility of pass the salt. And did you let the dog out? She stopped calling Julian. I stopped checking her phone. We existed like two shadows moving through the same space, never touching, never intersecting. The war wasn't over. But the battlefield had gone still. And in that stillness, I saw the full ruin, not just of our marriage, but of myself. Eliza had always been a force, bright, controlled, composed. Now she was none of those things. She wandered through the days like a woman made of glass, brittle and transparent. Her phone stopped ringing. The gallery had cut ties publicly. Her name was scrubbed from the website like she'd never existed. She spent hours staring at the wall, legs curled beneath her like a child. Sometimes she'd start a sentence and forget how to finish it. Once, I found her crying in the pantry, just standing there, between the cereal boxes, her back to me, her breath ragged. I didn't speak. I just closed the door quietly and walked away. Because what was there left to say? What was left that wouldn't feel like cruelty? But silence is never neutral. It's a language all its own. And ours was speaking in screams we pretended not to hear. One night, I woke to find her sitting at the edge of our bed, head in her hands. The room was dark, her silhouette carved from moonlight and shame. You knew, she whispered. I didn't respond. She didn't look at me when she said it again, louder this time, like she needed the words to hurt. You knew everything, didn't you? I sat up slowly. The air was heavy with something I couldn't name. I knew enough, I said. She turned toward me, eyes red and swollen. Why didn't you leave? A pause. Then I said the one thing I'd been afraid to admit, even to myself, because I wanted you to feel it. Her breath caught. She blinked, once, twice. Feel what? I met her gaze, what it's like to be ruined by someone you trusted. She left the room without a word. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut, soft and final. I laid back in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But then again, we were already so far past that point. The map didn't even show it anymore. Days passed. A week. Maybe two. Time stopped meaning anything. She stopped dressing up, started sleeping on the couch. I stopped pretending to care. We became ghosts of the people we used to be, and in that quiet, I began to realize something awful. It wasn't just Eliza who'd changed. It was me. I used to be kind, patient, The kind of man who believed that love was something worth salvaging, even when it hurt. Now I was something else. Colder, sharper, someone who could lie with a smile and watch a woman unravel without blinking. But here's the thing about silence. It holds secrets long after they've been exposed. And buried beneath ours was a truth I hadn't faced yet. I didn't destroy her alone. She gave me the tools, but I built the pyre, and I lit the match. One night, she tried to speak again. I didn't love him, she said, voice trembling. I said nothing. She stepped closer. It was never about him. It was about, she stopped. I didn't press her, because I didn't need to hear the excuse. I already knew the truth. She hadn't betrayed me because she fell for someone else. She betrayed me because she wanted to see how far she could fall and still be caught. And when I didn't catch her, she fell harder. We were no longer married. Not in any real sense. The papers weren't signed yet. The lawyers hadn't been called. But the damage, irreversible. She knew it. And so did I. I thought about leaving. I even packed a bag once. But I didn't go. Not yet. Because something inside me still wanted to see how it ended. Not the marriage. Her. How far she'd fall. How far she'd let herself go before she finally looked in the mirror and saw what she'd become. And maybe, just maybe, what I had become too. There's a strange kind of grief that comes when someone you love is still breathing. Not dead. Just gone. And yet, still there, sitting across from you, holding a cup of tea with hands that once held your face. It's like morning. A shadow. I started dreaming about her. Not the woman she'd become, but the one she used to be. The version of Eliza who painted her toenails on the coffee table while humming to Fleetwood Mac. Who brought home pastries on Thursdays for no reason. Who whispered I love you like it was a secret we shared against the world. I missed that woman. God help me. I missed her like oxygen. But she didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. One morning, she said my name like it mattered. Daniel. She whispered, standing in the doorway of my office. I need to talk. It was the first time she'd said my name in weeks. Maybe months. It sounded foreign, like hearing your own voice on a recording familiar, but wrong. I set my pen down. Looked up. She stepped in slowly, arms folded, eyes hollow. She wore no makeup. Just a sweatshirt and faded jeans. Her hair was tied up messily, strands falling down the side of her face. She looked human. For the first time in a long time. I saw the photos, she said. She didn't mean the ones from the letter. She meant the ones I kept hidden. The ones she had no right to see. I didn't ask how she found them. I just waited. You were watching me? She asked. All those months. I nodded once. Slowly. I was. Why? Her voice wasn't angry. It was quieter than that. Worse. It was wounded. And I hated that I felt it. Her pain, even now, even after everything. I had to know who you were, I said. She nodded like she understood. But I don't think she did. Not really. Because even now, I wasn't sure I did either. She sat down across from me. Same chair where I'd first kissed her forehead the day she told me her mother had died. Same chair where I'd once slipped an engagement ring into her palm, too nervous to speak. Now. It was a confession booth. A war table. A grave. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she said. I looked at her, and something inside me laughed. Bitter. Cold. She flinched at my expression. I'm not saying that to excuse it, she continued, voice cracking. I'm saying it because I need you to know it wasn't about him. Not really. I believed her. That was the worst part. I believed her, because Julian was just a mirror. A stage. A thrill. The betrayal wasn't about sex or escape. It was about the slow erosion of identity. Of purpose. Of meaning. When I first met you, she said, you looked at me like I was the center of the world. And for a while, I believed you. I believed I was worth that. Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't blink away. But somewhere along the line, I stopped being that person. And I didn't know how to tell you. So you lied? I asked. She didn't answer, because she didn't need to. There are no villains in the version of the story where everyone's broken. Only consequences. Only choices. And Eliza had made hers. So had I. I want to leave, she whispered finally. I don't mean the marriage. I mean the city. This life. The person I've become. I stared at her, trying to imagine this house without her. Trying to imagine myself without her. For months, I thought this was what I wanted. To hurt her. To make her feel the burn of what she did to me. And now I didn't know. She leaned forward, placing something on the table. A small black box. Inside, her wedding ring. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. Good, I replied. Because I don't have it. But she nodded like she understood, not just my words, but the emptiness behind them, the futility of trying to build anything on a foundation we both helped destroy. She left 2 days later. No dramatic goodbye. No storming out. She packed quietly. One suitcase. One coat. She took nothing else. Not the china we picked out together. Not the photo albums. Not even the hideous green throw blanket she used to insist on keeping over the couch. She left the key on the counter. And for the first time in a year, the house was quiet in a different way. Not heavy. Not angry. Just empty. I stood in the living room for a long time that night, staring at the blank space where her shoes used to sit. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't heartbroken. I was hollow. And maybe that was the truest consequence of all. Not the shouting, not the betrayal, but the echo, the ghost of what we had, and the knowledge that I would carry the weight of her name for the rest of my life. You don't inherit pain the way you inherit money. Pain is quieter, slower. It slips into your bloodstream and builds a home in your habits. I didn't realize how much of her I still carried until she was gone. After Eliza left, the house didn't feel triumphant. It felt abandoned, not like she died, not even like she moved. It was worse than that. It felt like she'd evaporated, like the woman I'd loved, the one I hated, the one who had betrayed me in 100 beautiful, bleeding ways, had never really existed. Just a ghost in perfume and silk, now vanished into the fog. But everything she touched still echoed. The wine glass in the cabinet she never quite reached without standing on her toes. The tiny scrape on the counter where she dropped the olive jar 3 summers ago. The books on the shelf, a half of which I'd never read but kept because she loved how they looked. They were relics. Her inheritance. I tried to move on. Tried to go back to the man I was before. But I'd lost track of him. Somewhere between the surveillance and the silence, I became something else. Harder. Colder. Sharper. I no longer flinched at cruelty. I no longer cried at memory. I studied people differently now. Measured them by their silences, not their words. I caught lies in the breath before a sentence. I learned to love without trusting. If you can call that love at all. It wasn't just Eliza who left something behind. I'd inherited something too. A suspicion I couldn't shake. A darkness I didn't choose but had learned to live with. I found myself checking passwords on reflex, Googling names without reason, watching expressions for cracks. I wasn't healing. I was adapting. One afternoon, I got a letter, real mail, postmarked from a quiet town on the coast. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. I didn't open it right away. It sat on my desk for 2 days, temptation without motion. Eventually, I broke the seal. Inside, 1 page. No greeting, no closing. Just, I'm sorry I became someone else. I'm trying to find my way back. Not to you, to me. Nothing more. No apology for the lies. No mention of Julian. No hope dangled. Just a single line of brutal honesty. And strangely, it was enough. Not because it made things okay, but because it confirmed what I'd come to accept. She was gone. And maybe she was never mine to begin with. I've thought a lot about that. Ownership. We talk about people like their possessions. My wife. My husband. Mine. But love isn't ownership. It's vulnerability with hope attached. And Eliza. She'd always been terrified of both. A few weeks later, I ran into a friend we'd shared, Marianne. She'd always adored Eliza. Called her the most magnetic woman I've ever met. Over coffee, she asked gently, "Do you hate her?" I didn't answer at first, but eventually I said, "No," and that surprised me. But it was true. I didn't hate Eliza. I hated what she'd done. Hated what I'd become in response. But hatred requires energy, and all I had left was weight. The weight of what we were. The weight of silence. The weight of a ring that still sat in my drawer, untouched. Some nights, I still wake expecting to find her there. Not the woman who betrayed me. The one who used to sing in the shower. Who danced barefoot in the kitchen. Who pressed her forehead to mine like we were puzzle pieces cut from the same soul. But memory lies. And nostalgia is a hell of a con artist. Because the truth, that version of her died long before she left. Maybe she never lived at all. Now, when I hear her name, it doesn't cut. Doesn't soothe either. It just lands quiet and final, like dust. Like inheritance. It started with a box point when I should have thrown away, but grief plays tricks on logic, and some boxes are easier to ignore than open. I found it buried in the back of the closet, hers. Taped shut, labeled in her handwriting. Studio, old prints. I assumed it was art, gallery work. But curiosity is a slow-burning fuse, and mine had been lit for months. Inside, Polaroids. Dozens. Most were innocuous exhibit mock-ups, gallery layouts, sketches scrawled on napkins, But one photo stopped me cold. It was Eliza, maybe a year into our marriage. She was standing in a room I didn't recognize, sunlight slanting across her face, arms crossed, head tilted with that knowing smile she used like a blade. She was laughing. But it wasn't the setting that undid me. It was the person who took it. In the lower right corner, barely visible in the reflection of a framed painting, was Julian. Same jawline, same watch, taken long before I knew his name. Before he was Julian. Before I ever saw him in the gallery. The timeline shattered. This wasn't a spontaneous affair. It had been planned. Or worse, ongoing. I flipped through the rest of the box, found a receipt for a gallery dinner. Dated during our honeymoon. A sketch with his initials scribbled in the corner. A birthday card, and signed, but in his handwriting, tucked inside a book she once gave me. My pulse thudded behind my eyes. I believed the lie had started 2 years ago. Now, I wasn't sure it ever ended. Or that it ever started. Maybe it had always been there. Maybe I was the affair, the placeholder, the man she married while waiting for someone else. I don't remember sitting down, but I must have, because the next thing I recall is staring at the photograph again. Her smile frozen in time. Not guilty, not sorry, just certain. She had been happy in that moment, and it hadn't been with me. The walls felt closer after that, the air heavier. Everything I'd spent the last year rebuilding suddenly felt hollow. My forgiveness, my acceptance, it was built on a lie I hadn't even discovered yet. She didn't just betray me. She rewrote our history and left me memorizing the wrong script. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling. The image of that photo playing over and over. Her face. His shadow. The timeline snapping backward like a rubber band. All this time, I thought I'd uncovered the worst of it. But betrayal doesn't announce when it's finished. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it saves its sharpest teeth for last. The next morning, I found myself at the beach. She used to love the ocean. Said it reminded her that everything eventually returns to its source. I stood in the surf, the wind in my coat, clutching that photograph like it owed me an explanation. And for a while, I let myself feel it. All of it. The pain. The shame. The stupidity of love. The cruel poetry of trusting the wrong person with your future. And then, I let it go. Literally. The photo floated out on the tide, shrinking in the distance until it disappeared beneath the surface, and with it, something inside me loosened. Maybe not forgiveness, but freedom, because I finally understood something. I would never get the full truth, not from her, not from the past. Closure isn't always a door you walk through. Sometimes, it's a door you nail shut. That photograph could have destroyed me. Instead, it finished the job she started. It stripped away the fantasy, the memory, the woman I thought I loved. And it left me with something pure, not healing, not clarity, but truth, unfiltered, undeniable, and in its own bitter way, beautiful. It didn't end with a fight. No broken dishes. No screaming into the dark. No final, cinematic goodbye. It ended quietly, like a record slowing to a stop. No crash, no snap, just the sound of a song you once loved fading into silence. I didn't speak to Eliza again. After the letter, after the photograph, after the weight of it all settled into my bones, there was nothing left to say. I never responded. Not because I was punishing her, but because I had nothing left to give. The divorce finalized in the spring. A clean split. No alimony. No drawn-out battles. The lawyer asked if I wanted to contest anything: property, assets, royalties from the gallery print she'd once named after me. I shook my head. Let her keep it. Let her keep all of it. Because some things aren't worth dragging back into the light. Some ghosts deserve to sleep. They say time heals. It doesn't. It just teaches you how to live with the limp. And mine? It taught me how to breathe without her. How to laugh again, quietly, hesitantly, like testing the edge of a healed wound. How to trust people in pieces. How to be alone, not as punishment, but as restoration. I moved out of the house that summer. Gave the keys to a friend who needed a place. Packed one suitcase, 2 boxes, and left everything else behind. The couch where we watched old movies. The coffee mug she bought in Paris. Even the green throw blanket I used to hate. Let the next tenants make their own memories. I was done living inside ours. I bought a small apartment by the bay. Nothing special, just enough space for me and the silence. And some nights, when the wind moved through the windows just right, I swore I could hear her voice, laughing, apologizing, lying. But ghosts don't ask for permission. They linger whether you want them or not. I started painting again. Not professionally, not for show, just painting. Brush to canvas. Color to emptiness. It didn't fix anything. but it softened the edges of things that used to bleed. One day, I ran into Julian. A bookstore. Of all places. He looked smaller than I remembered. Gaunt. Older. I was too tired for someone his age. He didn't recognize me at first. When he did, his face froze. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. Don't, I said gently. There's nothing you can say that'll matter anymore. He nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't apologize. And I respected him more for that than anything else he'd done. People ask sometimes if I still think about her. If I still hate her. If I still love her. And the truth is, I don't know, because what we had wasn't just love. It was a mirror, a cathedral, a machine. And when it broke, it didn't just break her. It broke me too. But maybe that's the point. Maybe some people come into your life not to stay, but to split it clean down the middle. To force a reckoning. To burn the foundation. So you're forced to rebuild yourself from the ashes. Different, wiser, harder, freer. She taught me one final lesson. Not about betrayal, not even about pain, but about power, how easily it can twist when dressed as devotion, how deeply someone can cut you, not with malice, but with need, and how survival doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes, it just looks like quiet. So here's my requiem, Eliza Monroe. The woman I once loved more than breath, the woman who betrayed me like it was art, the woman who fell not because I pushed her, but because she thought no one ever would. Wherever she is now, I hope the mirror finally cracked, and I hope she's brave enough to look.